When we are doing the will of our true self, we are inevitably doing the will of the universe. In magic, these are seen as indistinguishable. That every human soul is in fact one human soul. It is the soul of the universe itself. And as long as you are doing the will of the universe, then it is impossible to do anything wrong.
Between everybody and his total environment.
Every human soul is in fact one human soul. It is the soul of the universe itself.
That scientists tell us that there's no meaning at all in everything we see out there. That's external reality which can have no relation to human consciousness. Who writes the great books? It isn't we who sign our names. What is an artist is a man with antennae who knows how to hook up the currents in the cosmos or whatever.
My name is Revel Roz, and this is Pragmagick. In this podcast, we will journey through the investigation and application of metaphysical means to enhance and inspire what I consider to be the great unifying purpose of our short human existence, the creative process. And it's my intention to learn and reveal exercises that X-hex those inner oppressive thought patterns, as well as exorcising those lurking psychic vampires. So join me as I consort the unseen as means for getting the fuck out of creative stagnation. Stagnation that bewitches each and all of us, artists or not. This week marks the anniversary of my tenure, albeit short tenure, with the infamous online weirdo and witches journal, DISINFO.com. It was truly a major high five to my younger self. I was able to contribute to the long, strange pantheon of luminaries and thinkers that helped shape my occulting and metaphysical journey since I was but a wee punk. Disinformation, especially the Richard Metzger era from when I was young, he now runs dangerousminds.net, but in any case, Disinformation published The Book of Lies, which that book especially imbued in me the rock and roll occultism my porous rebellion quenched as a young seeker. From the psychotronic magics of psychic TV, William S. Burroughs, Grant Morrison, and the one and only Robert Anton Wilson, I was set. But in the last remaining years of Disinfo, audio sorcerer, psychonaut, and edgelord slayer Thad McKraken was given the reins to the Disinfo kingdom. Long before I had come around as a writing contributor, but not long after, the company veered heavy into the online blogging behemoth many of us magical misfits came to peruse on the regular. For good and for bad, Thad accepts that heavy burden of that site's twilight years, from the inner turmoil amongst its contributors, to the solidification of anchoring a discordant society of ne'er-do-wells and battling the naysayers within the edgelord annals of internet history. So it is my honor to welcome Thad McKraken, late editor of DISINFO.com, audio sorcerer, psychonaut, and straight up weirdo. So slither hither, weirdos and witches. Here's my conversation with the illustrious Thad McKraken. Thanks so much for taking the time to do this.
faux shizzle, man. Yeah, no problem. Definitely.
Well, I think I got a lot of topics I want to talk to you about. I thought we'd start though with DISINFO just because it's
Yes,
topical.
we can talk about the topical time. We're just gonna go right into it. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, why not?
Okay, cool. Yeah, I didn't know if there's gonna be like introductions or whatever, but yeah, let's just roll. Man, yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, I wish I was talking to you under better circumstances, but unfortunately, yeah, DISINFO got taken down, and what's fucked up is it got taken down for like honestly a very legit reason.
A very legit reason?
Well, yeah. I mean, sadly, the fact of the matter is, like, that site was using potentially copyrighted images forever, like ever since I'd been writing about it, and like for a really long time, right? And the thing is, that's not technically legal. It's like sort of like smoking weed and speeding. Like just because smoking weed was illegal, until 2012 in Washington didn't mean I didn't smoke weed every day. I speed every day to work. Websites, use images and they're like, hey, credit this. And I was doing it on the side too. I was trying to do like, like shit that I thought no one's ever going to sue me if I like rip a Doctor Strange image. Like Marvel doesn't give a fuck. They're, And the thing about doing this is in most cases, really all that's going to happen is they're just going to be, hey, like, take that down, right? And there was a DMC takedown notice right on the site. I was running it for over a year. Nobody ever emailed me once about anything. But the problem is there's now things like a lot of these companies like YouTube have technology where they go scanning websites looking for copyright. It's called essentially copyright trolling. The word I'm completely not familiar with. So they actually use programs that go through and just scan stuff, and that's sort of what happened to DISINFO. I mean, it was some copyrighted, and I don't even really know the details, and that's just I could read between the lines that that's sort of what happened. And so the problem is they do this to try and shake you down, which they technically can legally do. They're basically like, hey, we don't want to sue you, give us money. And so to back up a little bit, and it's a completely legit reason. And what's so funny is like I do a podcast with Jake Dill, who's a DJ who works for like iHeartMedia, which is like this huge evil media conglomerate. He's on like a legit radio DJ in LA. And yeah, I mean, they have training about what you can do and not do in copyright. DISINFO was never doing that. Like, admittedly, like we were getting people, like myself included, nobody was ever giving you any, like, we weren't paying anybody because, I mean, it was never that big of a company. And that is the sad thing about being taken down by such a stupid thing is that we weren't making any money. It's not like we were making any money off of these images at this point. But the problem is, it used to be a big corporation. It's still officially a company, so.
Well, let's get into that. I wanted to talk to you how you got involved. I've read somewhere that it was after kind of your big psychonaut kind of journey. That's
actually, well, first of all, I mean, I've been probably like yourself, fans of DISINFO for a long time. And yeah, if I just like back it up to finish the thought. So why this did take down DISINFO though is essentially because the owner wanted to retire a while ago. He really just wanted nothing to do with it. I get the vibe that he probably lost a lot of money off of it in the last several years. And so he was like officially like, I'm not putting any more money into this. So
was he at all involved with the Richard Metzger era?
Oh yeah, no, he's been around. The guy, Gary has been around. The guy who still owned it had been around from the beginning. But myself, no. Yeah. So how I got involved with DISINFO is and thanks for you contributing, by the way.
Hey, it was
recently, and yeah,
on the bucket list. I've like you said, been a fan of it forever. It's kind of the reason why I'm into a lot of this, especially the chaos magic stuff. Got me going. So. It was an honor.
Yeah, myself as well. No, and thanks for contributing. It was, I guess, an honor to run it for a year and a quarter. And what's so funny is I was kind of like half-assedly running it, and I was planning on 2019 because I had a couple projects finishing up. So the plan was like really ramp it up and try and see if I could get it profitable. And so I'm definitely glad this happened before I did any of that.
Did you manifest this?
Well, we can talk about that later. Yeah. I mean, in a way, I think maybe I did, and I was shown some things that I'm not going to get into in some trances that, like, I think I've been told exactly why this had to happen, and it's actually really fucked up. So I'm not going to get into it that's sort of the role I went with Magic, but I can give some hints. I can at least talk about philosophically why possibly I did kill it, but on a subconscious level. But anyways, yeah. So the story of how I got into DISINFO is that, in fact, sort of, again, like you, man, what the funny thing is, I had been, DISINFO is literally, and I'm old enough, I'm 41 now, so I actually, remember when the internet was really just I didn't even use it. I didn't even have cable internet until I don't think 2006. So I remember way back in the dial-up days. And so way back then, DISINFO started in 1996. And this is the sad part about it dying, is that it was around for it was coming right up on 22 years. And it was one of the kind of original website, and it still probably is the longest running countercultural website in the world. I don't know what would have to catch up to it. I guess if you consider Daily Grail a countercultural website, which is more of a paranormal, they're about to hit 20, I think. So they'll probably beat it. But so that's what. So yeah, I mean, I've been into this for years. Since it was one of the first sites that I ever actually regularly checked, way back in the dial-up internet days. I had all the books. I had, they put out DVDs. So yeah, I mean, exactly. It was a huge influence on who I was as a person, and I was a fan for years. And so in 2012, actually, I ended up doing this acid ritual. And yeah, and this is, and so I have to preface this by saying, because you bring up 2012 and everybody is instantly oh, that's so retarded. And I never, ever thought ever that there was going to be some sort of apocalypse or anything like that in 2012. But in 2010, I started receiving kind of weird downloads of information. And also, I wasn't willing to just completely discount the Mayans and stuff. More to the point, I thought that regardless the way, if you're kind of looking at consciousness from more of a standpoint of sorcery, this idea that something was going on in 2012 was sort of embedded into the counterculture through people like Grant Morrison Daniel Pinchbeck, and of course Terence McKenna, who had came up with the time wave zero, and that's probably the reason, so it was this feedback loop. So I'm okay, maybe there is some weird energy there. The other thing is I just released this album called An Echo Through the Eyes of Forever by my old band Black Science. And that was a really weird, that's a story in itself. The band that broke up before this album ever came out, right? And so not only that, we actually named the final track that we were working on, Our Sentence Is Up, because Dean, who was recording our album, had the book by Patrick Meany, I believe, in the studio called Our Sentence Is Up. And we had an instrumental final track, and I was like, okay, that's the name of the track. And I picked it, and then once I gave it that name, then a week later on the same day, my brother came into the studio and told me he was moving out of town to Edmonton, and the drummer was having a kid. So we named this song Our Senses Up, and then less than a week later on the same day, I sort of realized that band was sort of over, which was just, and it was right before 2012. So anyway, so I had this album, and the weird postscript to that story is that album is by far the most successful music I've made by a band that broke up before it even came out. So, it's yeah, it's not the way shit works, man. And I think DISINFO too. This is so my experiences with magic, the universe, the idea that the universe is going to give you what you want. It's kind of going to give you what you need. So that's just the way it always sort of works. So anyways, most of my rituals at this point, I was just sort of thinking about, magic and more kind of doing psychedelics in a more ritualistic sense. I didn't even really do psychedelics that often in my life anymore. And I did a lot of times doing them recreational, and I sometimes when I was younger did kind of more ritualistic usage. But this time I had some good LSD, and I kind of did a ritual with my wife, which was fun. But then I was like, you know what? This album is going to come out. So I actually had 3 albums because a friend of mine mastered some of my old electronic tracks, and I put kind of 2 compilations of albums of that, of kind of old basement stuff that I did that my friend remastered for me. So I actually had 3 albums. So I planned this ritual around the Holy Trinity, and I took a day off work where no one else was going to be around, and so I just went full on and did an acid audio ritual. Now, there's a couple interesting things I could say about this ritual. Is that, one, there's a huge difference between doing psychedelic drugs ritualistically and doing them recreationally. And I don't really do them recreationally anymore, because when I've started doing them ritualistically, yeah, I mean, there's just so much a level of communication. And what I say is, rather than saying, hey, this is going to be a fun afternoon or whatever, or I'm going to go to a rock concert or something, literally saying, I'm going to try and communicate with a higher intelligence. Think about it in that more shamanic context. So I did that. And the point of these rituals, by the way, was I had a new album out. I wanted to get that out to more people than my other music had been, or other stuff had gotten out to before. A better reaction, obviously. And weirdly enough, I started working on a book because of the previous magic ritual I did. That was the big revelation there, where it was like, oh my God, I need to, one of the most important things that as a magician you're supposed to be doing is keeping a magic journal, and I just wasn't doing that. And so my first book came out of me realizing in kind of an acid ritual, like, oh shit, that's what I need to be doing with my life. So I had started working on that. So, it was, so I was working on my writing, and I had actually been writing for another couple psychedelic websites and doing some music journalism. So it was like, that was the point to the rituals. Like, I want to get my stuff out to a wider audience, essentially. I was more thinking the music, but the writing was there too, right? I've been doing both. And so I did it. And the funny things I could say about the ritual is a couple things. One, it was just classic psychedelic weird hallucinations that I always get, completely otherworldly shit. But there was a couple moments, like at one moment I realized, whoa, this is going to have, what I'm doing is going to have effects on a spiritual level that I don't know if I'm prepared for at all. Like, it was like this realization that I am like setting something into motion here that, like, and I wasn't considering that before I did it, but it was like, what I am doing is setting events into motion on a psychic level that I was not considering that was going to happen when I did this, right? This is my first like real acid ritual.
Yeah.
And
I've
the other thing that
effects of audiomancy is kind of, every time I do a kind of session of audiomancy, I will find stuff within the realm of esotericism that totally reinforces what I saw or what I felt.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the kind of music I make, really, it is, and this is what I realized. I got into what I call audio sorcery when I was honestly like 18, 19 years old, and I started screwing around with 4-tracks, and it was just like, I was like such a weird guy who my entire obsession was like, like most guys are like partying and girls, and I'm like, I'm going to make weird albums and freak myself the fuck out with them, This is like who I was at a young age, right? And I still have a lot of this stuff, and, some of it's, so yeah, and I wasn't thinking about it back then, like, oh, I'm doing these weird audio rituals, but that's exactly what I was doing. I was doing kind of summoning rituals. This music, the design was to induce these states of consciousness, which, and it was a very personal thing. Like, it wasn't like I was doing this for any other reason than to just fuck with my head, essentially, and to, kind of distort your perception of time. So anyways, when I finally, years later, I'm doing this in 2012. And one, I realized, oh shit, this is going to have some weird side effects that I wasn't really anticipating. And okay. And the other thing is, there was one point where I just had like this experience that it was like spirits from above. And I had this vision of how they saw me, which is as this monkey going like, what the fuck? Like, what else do you want me to do? It's like, come on. Like, I think this sounds really good. It was just this bizarre like thing of like this perspective of the spirits, like, and me just like with my arms, like, come on, like, how much more do I got to dance for you motherfuckers? Right.
Right.
So then on one note, so I won't get into it too detailed, but the weird side effects that it had in my psychic life is then for the next 1.5 to 2 years, I had, first about a week later, I had this experience where this spirit form sidled up to me in a kind of hypnagogic, kind of more of like a hypnagogic sleep paralysis, these states, and attached itself to, to my consciousness, and kind of merged with my soul structure telepathically. And it projected this image of this was the next step in my magic, was going from knowledge and conversation with your holy guardian angel to then kicking it up to communion with your holy guardian angel. And then with that, it tried to pull me out. Well, it presented itself to me as my wife, like my wife naked, like this is a fun sexual thing. And then it tried to pull my body, pull me out of my body, essentially up and towards the sky. And when that happened, of course, I freaked the fuck out, because that sensation of getting pulled out of your body is so weird. And, you have this perception that it shouldn't be happening. And so I could never make this happen. So for a year, and I've written about this extensively, I was having this conscious experience after I did this ritual of these spirit forms trying to show me, like almost like the straight up alien abduction shit. Like, Yeah, communion with your holy and guardian angel. We pull you out of your body. And they presented it themselves to me as a bunch of different weird figures. Sometimes it was kind of hilarious because it was like girls that I sort of had a crush on and wasn't really acknowledging to myself, things like that. And
so you think
they are like weird.
They are like internal projections?
Yeah, I mean, clearly they're like reading your thoughts, And
okay, but they are like outside beings.
Oh yeah. No, these things are trying to pull me out of my body. And what's so fucked up about this is it finally stopped happening after a while. And then I'd forgotten why. And I realized that I was actually shown after a while. And what they showed is that these things were sort of like just as scared of me as I was of them. And that's why it didn't really work. So yeah, which was a really weird and even more bizarre thought, is that part of what was going wrong is that when I first start freaking out, it freaks them out. And again, I was sort of reassured that that's not a big deal. But
this was the first LSD ritual?
Yeah, so this is my first LSD ritual. And and this ties back to DISINFO. This is why I'm telling this story. I'm not just going on a super long tangent, which totally. I sort of am. It's a long story. But the spiritual meaning. So anyways, so I did this ritual, and then weirdly enough, like an interview for that band did end up airing on DISINFO.com. And then later that year, literally a week after December 20th, 2012, DISINFO picked up my writing, and my writing did, in fact, get out to a way bigger audience. So that was and it's literally like a week after December 20th, 2012, so I did this weird 2012 acid ritual, and then right on cue, exactly what I was asking for was sort of answered for me in a way. So that's actually the story of how I ended up writing on DISINFO. Of course, I wouldn't have kept doing it if people didn't like what I was doing and I was getting a great reaction. But yeah. So that's the story.
I know what you mean about the December 21st, 2012 woo-woo that was going on. But something incredible happened to me as well, but I wouldn't classify it as anything other than a shift in consciousness, an internal one. But I want to get back to the audiomancy stuff or audio sorcery stuff you talked about. If we can in a little bit.
People that are into this.
It's been kind of the most natural practice I've ever had. It was born out of sheer curiosity, not influenced by anything else, and it's only been able to kind of see the parallels in other people's writings and esotericism and stuff that I've discovered that I'm tapping into something that's not just an inner,
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
So I'm sorry.
So back to 2012 too, and I hope anyway, there's a lot of people that are still like that. So I realize it, but what I've always said about it is, one, this is a personal thing that I did, and two, I've always said that if there was some kind of shift of consciousness going to happen, you can't look at it 10 years after the fact. It's 20
totally.
Years. Perception of time moves so much slower on the other realm. I mean, from what I've seen about the spirit realm, they are looking at things 100 years is nothing to them. I would say you'd have to look at a sheer 100 years afterwards in 3012 to actually
really understand
whether something happened. And on that front, I think that a mere 4 or 5 years after 2012 and say 2016 or so, all of a sudden everybody was like, what the fuck is going on? And also in 2012, the other thing that people don't mention is entirely true, that this was the first victory in the drug war, and that marijuana was made legal in Washington and Colorado in November of 2012. So again, if we look back 100 years, we can say that was the start, when weed was legalized, of a weird psychedelic revolution that took 100 years to finally progress and have the human species evolve to a higher state of consciousness, start evolving to a higher state of consciousness. Maybe so. So
yeah,
anyway.
I read that you mentioned once, I think I wrote it down, you had said that you could go into how I've repeatedly been shown how demonic or reptilian entities control humanity with narcotics and booze. And I'd love to dig more into that, especially because I'm a ex-addict, I guess I could say. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I've always thought that it was a numbing of the psychic self that was the whole point.
I think it is a numbing of the psychic self, and you being a former addict, and that's the funny thing with me is I was never really an addict. I was, what you would say, a dangerous binge drinker, you know.
Okay. Yeah.
And I've done my share of pills as well, and I do think. And this is something, because I never quit drinking, but I absolutely, well, first, I could go into this straight up. Like, I started having dreams, and, you know, one of the things that I'm most known for is keeping a live dream vision journal on social media. And
Yeah,
I've
I
kept
remember.
records of a lot of this.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I had a repeated series of dreams that are basically just showing me these weird themes of the drug war and relating it to kind of, you know, the darker kind of demonic forces that are controlling reality. And it's like, I wasn't watching shows about this shit, you know, I wasn't feeling from an external level my consciousness. And yet this theme just like kept showing up.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there were outside,
What's that?
I was going to ask if there were any outside influences or any outside things you were looking into that might have dove into that. But no, it sounds completely transmitted.
No, exactly, and that's what was particularly weird about it. If you're right, I mean, if I was like watching shows about the drug war or something, or you know, or even like, you know, just fiction TV shows, or, you know, sure, this would make perfect sense. But I wasn't doing that at all. Like this, I was just having these weird visions, and just in a general sense. And there's another like completely weird thing about me and booze, and so when I first started practicing magic, and this is 2006, essentially. And when I first started being in this band, I was consumed with this weird idea that I could like conquer alcohol, right? Like it's like complete, and so these things corresponded, right? And it was, and I look back and it's just like, I'm not sure. Like, you know, it really does seem like it was this weird test, and I don't know like why I was suddenly like, because I've been trying to get away from partying for years, and suddenly when I started practicing magic, I was like, I can like beat alcohol. I can learn to be a really productive, fucking amazing drunk, right? And,
drink through the other side.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, I'm going to be, and I fully aware that this was partially inspired by people like Hunter S. Thompson, and I'm just kind of Robert Pollard, and you know, and
Guided by Voices.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge Robert Pollard fan.
Yeah,
guys, total drunk. And both these guys are very productive artists that drink. And I was like, I can do that. You know, I'm going to use booze to help me be productive. And it worked. And I did it for like 4 years. I was drinking, you know, and this is after years of drinking before that. But like, I was really like, man, and, you know, and it's like, I would drink all my fluids and like, you know, literally, I like looked at it as a science. Like, I am going to learn how to operate when I'm like wasted drunk all the time. And I did a completely amazing job of doing that. And I really do think that you keep tapping into this like complete, like dark, weird energy. And I've been shown this specifically, that there is like this weird vibe of, you know, drug energy that is fueling our society. And God, I've been shown just recently a couple of this. And so this is what I'm getting at, is like how much of our behavior is, you know, controlled by things like alcohol and booze. And so the end story of this, me doing this for like 4 years while I was in Black Science, is like, it completely blew up in my face. And at one point I started having a lot of crazy, like demonic attacks, like straight up, where it was like evil entities were invading my headspace and attacking me. And they were explaining to me straight up, it's like, dude, if you didn't drink, we wouldn't be able to do this. You know, it was, and that was sort of the point, is they were trying to point that out to me. It's like, we're actually doing this to get you to stop drinking. You know, it's like the reason we're being so harsh and fucking with you is because we're just like, we're trying to make it so unpleasant that you finally fucking stop what you're doing. So it was like, it was nice to believe. And so it was weird. Like I was manipulated into this weird thing where, you know, it's like your dad gives you a whole pack of fucking smokes. You know, it's like, you know, oh, you had one cigarette, you're going to smoke the whole pack. Like it was like that sort of weird experience where it was like, oh, you're going to master alcohol and be a productive drunk. And what ended up happening is I got my ass completely fucking kicked by alcohol and my body gave out. Yeah. And it is so funny because it is like, you know, you don't think about this when you're getting older, but it's like, you know, with like athletes, essentially a lot of times, you know, great athlete around age 35 or so, like, bam, they can't play anymore. Right. This is what happened to me with partying. Essentially, it was like, I was like, I could fucking rock it and drink beer all fucking day and get a ton of shit done. And then bam, like, no, your body can't handle that shit at all anymore. And I can't say enough how fucking difficult that was emotionally to deal with. like that is not an easy thing, man. Like getting over drugs, well, just like actually changing your life, you know, it's like it. And that's what I can say was, and this is why, I mean, as a warning to anybody, is like, I've cleaned my shit up. I've been like one of the few lucky people that I still do drink, but it's only like 2 or 3 drinks once or twice a week. But, you know, I can't, it's basically the difference between having some drinks every now and again and partying. And I finally got there, and I so rarely ever get out of control. So it's lucky because I never did want to give it up. But like, holy fuck, if you thought it was easy to get to that point, like, you're insane. Like, and from an emotional level, that's what I don't think like people get. Like, it was really like, you probably struggled with worse drug addiction than me. For me, it was like this weird, like, emotional thing that, you know, especially being a musician and stuff, like, being a partier was like so much of my personality, and like really just like giving that up. And yeah, I did have those days where it's like you could like feel the alcohol like just fucking calling to you, you know. I used to drink in the day like every Saturday, and like some days, I mean, when I was getting over that, there'd be days I'd get up and it's just like, oh my God, like I wanted, yeah. So,
I'm still trying to rectify the last 10 years of being a musician, you know, touring and just that lack of security, lack of discipline, but completely in the moment, like living for those, you know, minutes a day. And that's what happened in the other minutes, was filling that void in between. You know? But yeah. I get you.
And it's unfortunate too, because, you know, we are so enculturated into this shit. When I talk about, you know, we were just talking about society being run by, you know, alcohol, and, you know, it's like, as a musician, you're basically, especially when you're on a smaller level, you're basically a fucking booze salesman. I mean, that's sort of what you're doing.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I just released an album and was like, you know, I'm going to do everything in my power to not do the bar circuit. Not for any other reason than I don't want to participate in that whole, you know, economic structure.
No, I agree completely. And, you know, and they got this is one thing, I don't even know how good it is in Colorado at this point, but like, why don't we have weed clubs? Like, that is like the one thing. I'm like, why aren't there clubs where people can like buy and smoke weed while you're playing? Like, if I was going to be, we don't in Seattle. I mean, the funny thing about Seattle.
Oh,
is,
right.
Like,
you're in Seattle. I'm in Portland. I confused the two.
Do you have weed clubs already there? Because we still are.
We must. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, we don't have that
personally.
shit in Seattle, and it's been legal since like 2012, but we never passed laws allowing that. I think what's funny is there's always DIY clubs where you play at people could just smoke, but I've never been to a venue. God, even one of the best clubs in Seattle that finally sadly closed, the Fun House. Like, they always had a back porch where like they never gave a fuck about people blazing up back there.
Yeah, so, I can remember. Are you still using weed for your shamanistic endeavors?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I never gave up weed. In fact, I'm still a huge stoner, and that's in fact, the kind of magic that I practice is very weed based. You know, it's like that is the primary means by which I use. I use to create an altered state of consciousness, and I think I talk about it as ganjitation. I mean, definitely like a lot of this ganjitation. Yeah, a lot of the stuff that I channel, I have a very weed-based shamanic practice, you know, and I think because of that, you know, what I have to do, the kind of magic I do is, it really does have kind of more in common with shamanism than it does with the occult, but it's not shamanism either. So it's like, you know, it's like shamanism has such an association with nature and going out into the natural world, and like that is not my practice. Is more about merging with art rather than nature. So, you know, there's just a fundamental difference there. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely more of an occult feel to what I do. But yeah, no, I'm a total fucking stoner. I'm one of those people too that it's just like, if you ever see me, it's just like, are you high? And it's just like, well, I'm at work. Well, then the answer is yes.
Yeah.
If I'm not at work, I'm high. Like, if you see me and I'm not at work, I'm high.
You see, weed is the one thing where the one drug that always affected me the most, and it still is the hardest one. Like I have to treat it ritualistically. To do it, because it hits those levels real quickly for me.
Yeah. So what do you mean when it hits those levels? Like, you get really tripped out, or?
I would say tripped out, but more introverted, more heavy. Like a psychic weight, you know, where I need to be on my own to just have an exit strategy for everything, you know, not be cornered in, even, you know, with company. But yeah, that's the funny thing to me is, you know, I've done a lot of dumb stuff in my life, and weed has always been the hardest one to get into. I'm appreciative of that though, because I treat it seriously. You know, I treat it ritualistically. But
you know, the one thing I was actually, it's actually very weird because I mean, the thing about me, and I wasn't fully aware of this, like until I started like writing about magic for DISINFO, is that, you know, God, what I do is so different because it's a very weed based, like I said, it's a very weed based practice. And I was never, you know, I talk a lot about how I have a lot of psychic experiences and things that I've channeled where I have strong evidence that it lines up to reality. And I have like lots of examples now of things where I'm like, okay, here's this thing that I wrote about in 2014. And then 2 years later, this is exactly what happened, and like explain that shit, you know. And a lot of it, there's really, and you know, and it's like one or two of those be a coincidence. I'm at the point where I have like 7 or 8 of those that can be like completely verified. And I always talk about how I was summoned into the occult, and that is what happened. Like I was at this really low point in my life, and some fucking shrouded entity showed up in my room and kind of clapped its hands twice, the way a hypnotist would awaken a subject. And I bolted out of bed, and I suddenly realized that for like a decade of my life, I was in complete denial about the fact that, you know, I had kind of like greater psi abilities than most people, and I was kind of running away and afraid of those abilities, and I needed to embrace them because it was sort of like you can use this is a good thing. Like you're running away from being a fucking space wizard when being a space wizard is awesome, right? And so immediately after that, and part of that too is I needed to start practicing magic, and I started doing kind of like rudimentary sigil exercise the very next day. So it was this weird thing that happened, and you know, I don't have any proof that a shrouded entity showed up in my room and like snapped its fingers and turned, you know, yeah, exactly. But what I can say is there is some evidence in the fact that I am a guy that like everything who writes about like magic and channeling spirits and shit like this and doing spells like 2012, you know, acid rituals and shit. And, you know, I have like 2 books out that could be filed in, you know, the occult genre. And I've never been attracted to any part of that culture whatsoever. Like, you know, and so how does that happen? How does some guy that's not into the culture that's associated with the occult at all suddenly randomly start writing about this, you know, start writing books about this kind of shit? So again, there's no proof, but there is that. There's like most people that are into the occult, like have a fascination or attraction to that side of the culture. And then it's like, I don't at all. I was summoned into this shit. That's why I'm writing about it. Not because like, I thought it was cool or anything like that. In fact, I'm more of a psychedelic kind of weird guy. I'm not really a goth guy at all. Like never have been. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because it seems I've noticed, you know, towards the end of DISINFO, I'd like to get into just in the public eye and the occult renaissance, or, you know, neo-occult renaissance that's happening right now. I've noticed just an extreme divide in practitioners. You know, the big thing too, I've noticed that your work particularly seems divisive.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I can't put my finger on why. I think maybe it's like because you dip into some political areas. Am I close?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely, it's political areas. And yeah, I sort of lost my train of thought and where I was going with talking about being summoned in the occult, which I thought was like this weird thing. Like, how does like I get something? You know, someone get summoned in the occult, and yet I did in fact start playing around with astral projection when I was like 18 years old, because like psychedelics blew my mind, and like it's just something my mom was into and got me into, and that was completely fucking weird. Plus I was smoking pot like all the time, and so it was this combination, and weirdly enough, of course, like pot-based kind of sex magic shit too, like psychedelic sex magic combined with astral projection, and that's what fucking, you know, the occult is. You know, the tradition of combining astral projection with weed, and the idea that you can use weed to intensify astral projection is like, that is an occult thing. So this thing happened where I get something in the occult, and it seems weird to me because culturally that's like not my jam at all. And yet somehow it is like, oh yeah, but you did in fact start playing around with astral projection. projection and using weed as something to aid astral projection for like a decade before that happened. So I guess it's not really, you were sort of doing this shit. You just weren't thinking about it that way at all.
You do seem to have like an authoritative idea about the occult, though.
Well, if I was, so yeah, first of all, as far as my stuff being divisive, yeah. And what's weird about that too, is I've just written, probably two of my most popular pieces are just me talking about how I don't like EA ketting.
I was going to bring that one up too. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is the one thing about DISINFO dying, because the whole site got taken down. And it's like, man, I was getting people like messaging me about shit I wrote like 3 years ago over there. Like people were still finding this. I don't know. So that is the sort of a definitely sad thing about it. Taking down at the same time. So I was very critical. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm very critical of the kind of embracing darkness and spookiness era of the occult. It's not only never, and again, if that's your thing from an aesthetic perspective, I'm fine with it. And another thing that I would, so yes, my stuff is divisive, and it's partially just the nature of the goddamn internet, because when I write something like, it's the nature of internet and social media, it's like that shit works. Part of the reason that I'm known for that shit is like, those are the two most popular things I did. Like, and it's so funny, I still had people like, I troll Crowley and, and why did I keep doing it? And people rightfully call me out for doing it, and I'm just laughing. I'm like, if every time if I really wanted to get the site hits up on DISINFO, I would have just done that every fucking week, because it never didn't work. Like every single time you did a post about Crowley being a douchebag, it would get a bunch of hits. Like every single time. And I found that out the weird way. I did that post, and I swear to God, that's what like maxed out my friends on Facebook. And I didn't even realize that got posted when I was in this period where I wasn't even looking at social media, because I was like really focused on finishing this book I was working on. And like, yeah, I logged in my social media account. I was like, what the fuck? It was like, holy shit. Like, yeah.
And there were people critical of that piece, or were there people agreeing about the anti-Crowley?
People, well, both equally. Yeah. I mean, obviously there's a million hate comments, and then there's a million people asking me, my friends, people are still reading it to this, till just recently when it was probably taken down. So yeah, I mean, I was sort of getting egged on, and, there's part of me that's like, yeah, I mean, oh, fuck, that's what you like. Okay. But I do think there is a greater point, and where I would distance myself from, well, I mean, first of all, if I was going to be critical, again, I came to this stuff in astral projection. So for me, this is spirit work, right? Like I'm putting myself into trance states, and I'm fucking projecting myself to the outer reaches of the astral plane, and I'm bringing back information that I think will be that is what the occult is to me. Even basic things, like as I've gone on, like the idea that you're causing change in conformance with your will, like it's not really what I've been shown. I've been sort of shown that really this shit's controlling you. You're not like, it's like you're tapping into forces that are way bigger than you and sort of letting them control you and take control of the scene. Like, I don't think you're controlling shit. Like, I really think that's like a very egomaniacal way of looking at it. And that's just sort of what I've been shown. But, I mean, so my stuff is about spirit work, and channeling. My books are not like how-to instruction manuals about how to do rituals. They're shit that I've channeled. I write channeled books, So what I do is completely different than what other people are doing. And, it's like, it's not even the same thing. And as far as why I write about like the dark side of magic and stuff like this, man, I've been doing this shit for fucking years now. And it's like, if you were going to give your kid a fucking car, are you going to like tell your kid like, hey, you can kill people with this and you can kill yourself? Or do you just throw the keys to your car, the keys to your kid, and say, do whatever the fuck you want? I'm not into shooting guns, but like if you are a gun enthusiast and you're teaching a teenager like, hey, here's how you go out and shoot guns for ring-o hunting, do you tell them that you can kill people with that gun and that you can kill yourself and show them gun safety, or you just throw them a gun and say, do whatever the fuck you want?
That's so funny. Yeah, I just used that analogy in my last interview with Robert Powell. And I said,
nice.
It's a lot like, these new gurus, or especially these YouTube gurus like EA Coetting or whatever, are basically selling fully loaded automatic guns painted like toys.
Yeah, and again, this stuff, and I never like I came in like my I always joke also that I'm kind of more a comic book occultist, rather than like a horror movie occultist.
Sure, yeah. I mean,
like the Grant Morrison. Like people want to be Curly. I want to be fucking Doctor Strange, man. Like that's
exactly.
I want to like the idea that you're supposed to use this magic for good. But anyways, yeah. I mean, so what's so funny is like I also, by the way, like the article I wrote about Curly, like honestly cursed me to a certain extent, because then like anytime I mentioned open social media for like the next 8 months, it'd be like people asking me questions about Aleister fucking Crowley and shit. And I'm like, the thing is like, I'm not a fan of that guy. Like, so now it's like, I'm spending all my time talking about this thing that I'm not actually a fan of, which was sort of a pet fuck. But eventually, and so I was always going to do rituals. So like, oh God, I'm so sick of talking about Aleister Crowley at this point. But I was sort of in the spirit realm. It's like, no, you need to talk about him, and you need to talk about him from the spiritual perspective. And that, if I had to distance myself for all the criticism, and man, it was a lot, including scathing reviews of my book and shit like that for the Crowley piece, it was pretty high level trolling. But my entire thesis to that piece, and if I was going to say where I really separate myself from the occult, is exactly this. The thesis to that piece was that magic and things like sorcery work because all consciousness is connected. And the most important thing that you need to consider when you're getting into this stuff is karma, right? And how your actions are going to influence reality and what the larger impact is on reality. And that that's the most important thing, because the reason magic works is because consciousness is connected. We're all connected, and we're not just connected from what I've been shown to one another, but we're connected to like everything. This entire level of reality is there's a connectivity of consciousness, which is exactly why magic works and synchronicity works and stuff like that. So my entire theory is that Aleister Crowley was completely fucking irresponsible in his use of magic, which is undeniable.
You're not wrong.
He is somebody who did not believe in these concepts, and he ruined his fucking life with magic. So he is not somebody that we should put on a pedestal and look up to. He is actually a great example of what not to do with magic, and to do magic with zero regard to consequences. To do selfish egomaniacal magic to curse people all the time. This is the exact thing you don't want to do. None of the comments that I read so many negative comments on these pieces. Not one even addressed that. And that was the central fucking thesis of the piece. And so if that I think sums up the distance between me and other occultists in a nutshell. And there's an interesting follow-up to that story. Because like I said, I wrote that. I was away from social media. I didn't even realize the crazy reaction it got to like a month later. And then later, on Easter Sunday, which is only a couple months after that got posted, I think I got February and Easter was like in April or May. On Easter Sunday, my wife was like, "Hey, you want to go to the thrift store?" And so I was like, "Yeah, what the fuck?" So we went to the thrift store on Easter Sunday, and I found a used copy of the book of Abramelin the Mage at a thrift store. I had no intention of reading this book. I was just like, the book of Abramelin the Mage was not something that was on my reading list. And yet when you randomly find it at a bookstore on Easter Sunday, you're like, okay, cool. I'm going to read the book of Abramelin the Mage. When I did, the thing that shocked me, and I'd sort of known this in the books I've read about Crowley, but I'd never read the book itself. What shocked me the most about reading that book is that there's one thing Abramelin wants you to know, is that the most important thing about magic is that if you don't do it with the good of the greater whole in mind, it is going to backfire on you. If you don't consider the wider rear course of your action, and if you're doing it for selfish reasons, if you are not doing it to elevate the whole of humanity, then it is going to backfire you. He says this over and over and over and over and over again. If there is one thing that he wants you to know about magic, it's like, yes, you have to be doing this with pure intentions. This has to be for the right reasons. This has to be to help the greater whole of humanity because they are you. And Crowley completely read that, and he was like, but I want to use magic to be a selfish asshole. And he lived a horribly painful life, despite being famous, got addicted to every drug imaginable. He's a riches to rags story. He died poor with the whole country hating him, and so like, he was a miserable fucking asshole, sociopathic human being. And even he wondered near the end of his life before multiple sources, like, maybe I should have listened to Abramelin. Yes, this is my point. And again, I wrote again about this, and it's just like, and this is something that most people that are involved in occult circles like just don't want to hear. And you know what? I don't want to be judgy about it. I really do think that a lot of people that get into that kind of side of things have a very negative experience with the church. I think there's a lot of abuse there. But my point is, I played in a metal band for years, and I intentionally in this band, like, I played this very angry persona that ranted about like politics and shit, and it wasn't good for my mental health. In fact, it almost killed me. You are the art you create and who you are. And I think there's a cathartic nature that you can find in really embracing the dark side and the negatives in your life. But ultimately, you got to be really careful with that shit. Not only that, you can fuck your shit up with magic. And you can, in fact, fuck your life up with magic, just like you can with a car or a gun. And you shouldn't just go around doing it recklessly. You really shouldn't. Like, it's not a good idea. Like, I'm talking from experience. Like, I definitely think I'd probably fuck some things up, and weirdly enough, in my business, it's the things that have been fucked up that have been designed to help other people. That's what's like, there's like the purest intentions of all, and yet it's like I was sort of warned that wasn't a great idea, and I didn't listen. But yeah, what are you gonna do?
This here Pragmagick podcast is brought to you by Portland, Oregon's open source art religion and Pragmagick art collective, We the Hallowed. For more information, please visit wethehallowed.org or support these fine, pious individuals at patreon.com/wethehallowed. Remember, that's hallowed like saintly. HALLOWED. Thank you. And hold on.
Do you practice any kind of academic or old tradition or devotion?
Not really. Yeah, I mean, unless I guess on the primal level, the tradition of using weed to accentuate astral projection. Yeah, then yes, that, and
right.
Using and hypnagogia too. Yeah, definitely. Basic, and this is what's so amazing about this is in even more academic circles, the potentiality of hypnagogia and tapping into the liminal states of consciousness between awake and sleep. Yeah, I mean these are in fact ancient practices, but from the more traditional sense, like most of the stuff that I do is more visualization exercises, and it really is more internal, and it comes from spirit communication and reading dreams and visions. So in a way, you're right. That is an ancient tradition, but as far as like, do I read a bunch of ancient books like and try and invoke goetic demons? No, I don't do any of that stuff. But communicating with ancient demons, I do.
Yeah, I was
that I do.
You seem like natural. It was a natural wave. You said you were called to it. So I was wondering if you ever saw any parallels in other, works that I know. Cosmic Trigger is an obvious one that comes to mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And things like Cosmic Trigger in the works of Grant Morrison, absolutely.
Oh, totally.
But you're right from the standpoint that I really do come at this from, and you're right. I think there's a part of me where, and I think there's something about magic that, I can say straight up about, say, the military remote viewing programs and whatnot, is that with those, absolutely, like, and this is something that frustrates people, is that some people do just have these abilities, they are just sort of better. I think it's something that everyone can develop, but I do think that, some people just sort of have this abilities. And then there's people like myself and Grant Morrison. If I had to say that there's one thing in common between us, it's that both of us started playing around with weird esoteric spiritual practices that most people never play with when we were very young. Like Grant Morrison started doing kind of weird, Crowley ritualistic magic when he was like a teenager, and I started playing around with astral projection as a teenager. So it's a weird thing, and that's not something that a lot of people start getting into at a young age. And after years, like I said, I was in denial about it for about a decade. But yeah, no. The more the point though is like the book Cosmic Trigger is actually sort of about the combination in a way, and so is the book Supernatural by Graham Hancock that like DISINFO put out years back. It's about the combination between the similarities between like alien contact phenomenon and shamanic initiation rites and like Cosmic Trigger explores a lot of like the similarities. This idea that Grant Morrison popularized through DisinfoNaut.com, that you can contact extra dimensional forms of intelligence through sex magic. But that's what's kind of interesting. Like, I read a lot of stuff about the occult, and like, if you ask me to like recommend you occult blogs and stuff, and it's like, weirdly enough, I have more in common with like alien contactees. There's a podcast I used to listen to called Paratopia years ago, and like when I listen to like, I guess it's from the astral projection side, these stories about like these utterly bizarre encounters with these unknown forms of intelligence, and like how that manifests in these people's lives, who, by the way, aren't doing magic at all. Like, that is like, that's more relatable to me than most of what I read in magic circles. Like, I have more in common with like alien contactee people, because like, that's how weird my life is, So anyways, listen, when I say I was summoned into magic by like a weird entity with, a weird shrouded entity that unhypnotized me, like, I'm not just saying that. That's what fucking happened, man. And yeah, when I say I did acid rituals in 2012, and then my writing got picked up like right after 2012, like, and I went through a year-long period where weird spirit entities were pulling me out of my body and projecting sexual images into me to try and coax me out of my body. Like, that, that's my reality. That's what I deal with. So, and I have a lot of respect for like alien, especially the people that come out and talk about this, because it's a very similar experience of like, yeah, this is considered utterly nuts by our culture. And yet I'm here to tell you it's not crazy. It's always been here. There have always been people like me and people like these people saying this exact same shit. It doesn't matter where you point out in a history book. It's a fundamental aspect of the human condition that's always going to be here, and it's never going to go away. So from that standpoint, you can say it's crazy, but I'm not crazy, man.
No,
I intentionally got
you made a living off of it,
What's that?
You can't be crazy. You made a living off of it. I was kidding.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, man. Yeah, no. If you actually think I make money doing what I do, not really at all.
I was totally kidding.
But I wish I did, man. Yeah. Hopefully someday I'll make a living off it.
Because that's how we know, that's how everyone knows we're telling the truth, is when we make money.
Well, it is so funny, though, that you get that with magic, and there's inherent with spirituality, like, you will get that argument, like,
yeah,
if your magic worked, you'd be a millionaire.
I know, it's like, ridiculous.
No, actually, it's about a spiritual progression, and I think in most cases, you making a lot of money would probably deaden that. Like, I really do.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to touch on, you talked about the HGA, and I just, before we wrap up, I'm interested in seeing if you had any. I know your practice is so personal and it's so natural, but has there been anything that you thought you should write down that might be able to transpose to other people to maybe get to that communion with the HGA?
About how to make that happen.
Or steps to getting there,
Steps to getting there. I mean, the basics of sigil. I mean, the main thing I can say is the further in I've gone. Well, one, absolutely try Robert Monroe's techniques for astral projection. Try it. Like, that's what seemingly, I tried that. And if for people that don't really know what this is you're intentionally inducing a sleep paralysis state. Like, that is what you're doing. And he has this thing called hemisync technology that, it's basically, it's kind of like binaural beats. It's designed to kind of like synchronize the temples of the brain. And I started playing around with it at 18 years old, and it absolutely works. You're inducing these weird sleep paralysis states. And when I was in those states, I kept having these experiences where it was like there was entities there that were then controlling my dreams and communicating to me in the dream world. And this is why there's sleep paralysis. There's so much like literature out there with scientists be like, we've solved it. It's happening because of this. And you never hear the side of the story. It's like, people have been doing this on purpose for years. And I challenge anybody, hey, read some of my books and see how weird this gets. Like, no, this isn't just like the weird hallucination. You're literally sort of forced to deal with the idea that, yeah, it definitely seems like humans can essentially have this ability to sort of separate their souls into weird other altered states of consciousness through this process of intentionally inducing these vibrational states. Wow. And so, yeah, try that. That if you wanted some advice, try that.
I've never heard of it like inducing sleep paralysis. I experience it multiple times a month sometimes, but I've always known about sleep deprivation and things like that. But sleep paralysis, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, no, I'd look into it. Yeah, and I would recommend anybody. Robert Monroe has 3 books, and I would recommend. And that's the thing is, like, you can buy his tapes, and it's so funny. I've forwarded these to some people. It's like, I don't know, it's like $80 to get them at this point. I mean, it used to be way more expensive, but you can like download the shit for like $80. And I've even had some people being like, "Oh, that's expensive." Just listen to a decent bag of weed, you know? It's like, seriously, you would. This is something that will fuck you up as much as you want to fuck you up, as long as you have it, you know. So, and definitely read his books, because there's a level of like sort of like just suggesting that you can do this kind of thing, you know. And it's just the way consciousness works in general. It's like there's power of suggestion. It's so fascinating. And this is part of why I did this. Is like, you know, I had my mind blown the fact of psychedelics, and you're like talking to like my mom, who's square as fuck, and yet she played around with these tapes when she was younger, and so she gave me the books. And he talks about in, you know, entering the sleep paralysis state, and just that power of suggestion, like this can happen. It happened to me that night, which is part of the reason. So it was like, this sounds like a crazy batshit thing. And yet just the power of suggestion when I first read the book, and then it happened, I woke up in that state that night, and it was like, oh, okay, well, clearly this guy isn't just completely making up shit here, because exactly what he said would happen. And the only reason I mentioned that is because that's not uncommon. I've now seen a decent amount of articles on sleep paralysis, and like this guy made a movie about it, like a really weird, spooky horror movie. And I've now seen a lot of people like commenting, saying the exact same shit. It's like, I saw something about this, and then it happened to me that day. So like, that's not, so it's just fascinating. And this is like aspects of consciousness, like hypnosis, that we just conveniently ignore how weird and malleable, you know, human consciousness actually is. So yeah, I recommend reading the guy's books and playing around with his tapes. Other things, you know, man, I mean, the more I've gotten into magic, like learning how to master the hypnagogic state. And I, of course, use marijuana and often sex in conjunction with this. And, you know, it's incredibly a simple process. And I talk about this in, I don't really see anybody talking about this process, but this is it's a pretty basic process. It's basic sigil shit, right? You know, and it's so hilarious too, because like we're so uptight as a society about the sexual aspect of it, but like I'm a fucking human male. Like, I'm not going to pretend that I, you know, like beat off before I go to sleep every night anyway. So like, you know, like, sorry, like why? And this is what, when I first started getting into magic, you struggle with this. It's like, why the fuck are we so uptight about sex? Like, the sexual aspect of it was preventing me from trying it for so long until I got summoned into it. Cause I sort of read it, like I'd read like the DISINFO book of lies when I got summoned into it. But the whole time I'm like, this stuff is kind of creepy, you know, like I'm not honestly going to do that. You know, part of it is the sex. And yeah, so like on one side, it's like, that's kind of weird and creepy. And then on the other side, it's like, oh, let me watch more porn, you know, like it's what you were doing anyway, you know, like this idea that you're just like, oh, that's creepy to like have sex and think about something other than sex, you know?
Right.
So there's the whole idea.
That communion of two, you know, entities coming together and hitting that state is like, there's just nothing else like that.
Yeah. And one of my crazier stories, and this has only happened once in my life, but I did induce, and this is in my first book, if anyone wants to read about it, called The Galactic Dialogue, Occult Initiations, where I was like less than a year after I'd actually started practicing magic. But one of the things that happened very quickly is that I met the woman who ended up becoming my wife, and who I've now been with. God, we're coming up on our 10th anniversary. We've been together like 12 years at this point. Yeah, and so that's like one of the first things that happened when I started, you know, practicing magic. It was like we were just like drawn together, and I was at a really pathetic point in my life. And that's what sort of pulled me out of it, was like, you know, and but that's part of the weird thing about it. But the other weird aspect of it about it is on my birthday, and this is like a year after I started practicing magic, or like 6 months, I had this weird dream where it was this entity explaining to me that I was a latest incarnation of some kind of weird demonic god. And then it like the Emperor in Star Wars, my brother didn't believe that this was the case. And then like the Emperor, it shot these kind of weird bolts of electricity into me. And the other funny thing about this dream is like the second it said the word of this entity that I was, like I knew it immediately. There was this understanding, and I was like, holy shit, how did I forget that this is what I am? And like, it was honestly like terrifying at the same time. It was like, holy shit, that's what I am? Like whatever I am from this perspective is horrifying to a certain degree, right? And so then it shot bolts of energy into me, and my consciousness started accelerating like quicker and quicker, to the point that I woke up in bed screaming next to my wife, right? Okay, so 6 months after that, we're having sex, and completely unbeknownst to me, my wife starts having a spontaneous hallucination communication, where she starts communicating with this otherworldly entity, which tells her roughly the exact same thing, that I am some kind of incarnation of some ancient, she said it was kind of like a Polynesian god. And then when I came, it showed her god face. This is all in my book. And so there's this whole thing. No, I'm not even, and this is what's so crazy. And again, yeah,
I'm laughing
and again,
just how epic it is.
Yeah, it is epic. And then what's so funny is like, and that's what's so bizarre is like, oh, well, this stuff's just in my head. And yet then here is this thing my wife is telling me. Like, I didn't know this was happening at all. And then like, so like I finish up and then my wife is like telling me this after the fact. Like, oh, by the way, I just had this weird communication. Yeah, no, it's only looking at it's like this whole like thing in my book because I made her write it down, and so you can read it from her perspective. Like it's one of my weirder magical achievements. And what's so funny is like I talk about that, and a lot of people are like, when I say I have more in common with like UFO contactees and stuff like that. It wasn't until I read the book The Supernatural that was by Whitley Strieber and Jeffrey Kripal. I haven't read Strieber stuff in years, but that guy's got weird sex magic stories that put that shit that I just told you to shame. He has stories that are like, holy fuck, that is so much weirder than like inducing a weird visionary transmission in your wife. Like he is talking about other entities that are making him worship at the altar with like hallucinogenic vaginal secretions that, so yeah, no. It's that far out here, but yeah, there's absolutely something to sex magic. So anyway, sorry, I get a little sidetracked. I was supposed to be talking about ways to induce this. So yeah, I mean, that's honestly, and not enough people, I've only had a few people like try this, and I say this, and it's very simple. So basically, yeah, pick a symbol, smoke some pot, induce your altered state of consciousness, envision that symbol while you're practicing some basic sex magic, and continue envisioning the symbol. Look at the symbol as something very general that you want to see happen in your life. And that's the thing is I can't stress it enough. To me, intent is so much more important than any amount of rituals that you want. Like, I can't stress it enough. Yeah, intent is everything. Agree. Your intentions, this is what I'm talking about. If you're not doing it for the greater good of the whole, it's not going to work. And what it's probably going to do is just point that out to you. What's probably going to do is point out to you, like, dude, you were doing that for selfish fucking reasons, and all we did was just show you why you were,
Right.
It's like
make you figure it out.
Be very vague too. This is the other crazy thing about my men about magic. It's like, this is the problem. You don't know what you want at all. You have to be make it very vague. Like, I want something. If you are really passionate, I would say if you're really passionate about what you're doing, I would say, help me do this thing that I'm doing that I'm really passionate about. If you think you know your purpose, if you don't think you know your purpose, if you're lost, then make that the purpose of your magic. Hey, show me what I should be doing. Like, these are basic spells that if I was going to design a rudimentary, sigil or an image that you're going to assign, that's the kind of thing that I would assign. That would be my recommendation. And make sure that what you're doing is like, the goal to that is, if I find this thing that I'm supposed to be doing, it's going to be for the betterment of the entire collective consciousness. And if I'm going to get better at this thing that I want to pursue, I'm going to do that for the betterment of the elevation of human consciousness. That's a good, I think, intent. So do that. And then, so have your orgasm, and then just lie flat on your back, and then continue visualizing these images or whatever image you pick. And then I don't like rudimentary sigils either. Pick a cool image. Pick something that looks cool and imagine that in your head, and try to hear music in your head too. Like, I don't hear this enough. Like, as a musician, and this is becoming like increasingly, I've been shown this recently, where it's just like, your visualizations are shit, dude. Like, you need to be music. That's that's more powerful than the visual side of it. It's like, you need to be envisioning yourself as sound. Like, that's, and this is basically what the spirits have been showing me, and they're right. In fact, I've had specific exercises recently where, I've been sort of being challenged by this dark energy, and, it's just shown, and like, I'm trying to do all these visualizations to get rid of this dark energy. And eventually it was like, the whole point of that exercise is it was sound. And the second I really started focusing on sound, it was like, bam, well, dark vibes gone, like, mission accomplished. That was the whole, like, that's what we were trying to show you with that. It's like, fixate on sound. So think about that, lie on your back, and then just let yourself enter a hypnagogic state. Now, where this gets tough is then picking up what you encounter in that state, and I will say that's something that I've had to work on quite a bit over the years. Is if
could
you
you
do have
add like automatic writing to that, or
and this is
translate it?
Read my book. I have channel books, and like, I channel a lot of stuff through dream and astral states, but a lot of stuff I channel is in this, like, these hypnagogic states that I induce. I'll get into the state, and I love that Jung had the term active imagination. I was reading that one day, and I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what it is. So I put myself in this state of crazy active imagination, and yeah, I will straight up start hearing voices in my head. I will start having, a lot of times I have weird, like, kind of rapid hypnagogic dreams. And so that's the tough thing, is those dreams, making a habit of, like, remembering that shit. Like, because a lot of times it'll be like a lot of information packed into like a quick little jolt. And like when you pull yourself out of it, like, you know, I think, and I'm not going to say it's not easy, especially if you're high. Like, you know, it's like actually getting to the point where you're actually learning from that shit, because it's really easy to lose it and then just drift off to sleep. So really putting a lot of effort into, like, okay, when that happens, like kind of pulling yourself out and really going over it so you remember. What's so weird is I don't even typically get up and write it down. I think most people would probably have to do that. I typically can get to the point where I'm going to remember it the next day and I can write it down the next day. But yeah, I mean, it really is. If I was going to say the other thing where, yeah, like I said, that kind of differentiates me from most of the occult stuff that I read is, like, I don't know, man, in my mind, the fact that the human imagination, like when you say still, even with the occult revival and whatnot, when you say that you're into magic or, you know, you're a sorcerer, or I personally am increasingly like in space wizard, is, you know, when you say this, people are like, oh, you're fucking crazy, man. You know, that's crazy. And yet it's based on sound fucking science. Like, there are so many different aspects of the human imagination that we know scientifically for a fact that the human imagination seemingly has limitless potentiality. And this is a science fact that, you know, it's very occluded. This is like the most occult thing. It is absolute science fact. There are things like dissociative identity disorder. There are so many things that point to this. And some of them aren't even controversial. You know, like I said, there's like things that nobody will even argue with, like dissociative identity disorder, meditation. Now there's so much information about how beneficial and how, you know, strange meditation can be. Savantism, and some people don't get it. It's not just like autistic savants that have these crazy mental abilities. Some people get like kicked in the head or beaten in the head and then just instantly develop abilities. Inarguable science fact. There's hypnosis. Like, that is just an utterly insane aspect of our psychology that we just ignore. Lucid dreaming, fact. People lucid dream. This is a scientifically proven fact. We've proven this. Like, people have communicated with people on the other side, you know, through lucid dream. This was proven back in the 70s. There's been an increasing amount of research that's shown, you know, that with very minimal results, like with practice, something like 30% of people can teach themselves how to lucid dream in a week, you know, with just basically using standard techniques. So, I mean, and then there's psychedelic drugs. And none of the things that I just mentioned like 6 different phenomena that all point to the potentiality of human imagination. And none of them are even controversial at this point. Like, no, there is no scientist that's going to argue that, no, those aren't things. Like, you know, those are all known, bizarre aspects of that all point in the direction that this sorcery shit is legit. And so, man, I'm all about, like, there's some supreme mysteries there. Like, we should be looking into this. This should be our big branch of science. And, you know, it's in, like, most occult articles that I read are, you know, it's like, it doesn't really have that much to do with that stuff. You know, if I'm being truly honest, I'm like, I don't know what, like, lighting the right candles at the right time has to do with exploring the potential of the human imagination.
I think it's more
sometimes
about
it does.
Ceremony, just imprinting stuff into your subconscious. You know, it's like, it's putting all the pomp and circumstance in it just elevates that intensity to make you really that intentfulness. You know.
No, and it's not like I don't engage in rituals and stuff like that, but I guess you're right. I'm all about, I want to know how to fucking activate these weird parts of the imagination. I want to explore that and inducing these in altered states of consciousness, in dream states and trance states, and learning from the spirit realm in those states. That's my jam, you know? Like, if you ask me about, like, goetic spirits, I get a lot of questions about, like, weird esoteric spiritual practices, and I'm just like, weird, like, occult stuff, and I'm like, man, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to somebody recently. We were talking about currents. You know, when you do a traditional method, it's almost like this transcendental current that's happening outside of time and space, where you're connecting a lineage. So I can kind of see the benefit in keeping or practicing some of those traditions, especially if it's important to you. Then your subconscious is going to react to it more, I think. But I wanted to ask you, Mr. Former editor of DISINFO.com. What's on the docket now?
That's what I love about the term editor in that context is that I openly told people I don't really have time to edit your shit. Try and edit it most yourself. Like, yes, I was more kind of like a curator, I suppose, than editor. But anyways, you go.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you what's next on the docket. I know you have a book coming out and a record, right?
Yes, I do. Yeah. So sort of the weird thing with DISINFO, and I was like, when that opportunity came up, I was sort of only half-assing that site because I was already in the middle of writing a book and finishing a book and a record. And those are both really close to being done. So actually the record is done. I'm just kind of working on my promotional strategy at this point. It should be out the next couple months, or probably actually I would say early 2019 is probably going to come out. And that's Black Science. So look out for that. And I have another book coming out. I have 2 books out already. The Galactic Dialogue of Occult Initiations and Transmissions from Outside of Time. If what you're listening to here sounds interesting, I highly recommend reading Transmissions from Outside of Time. It is funny in saying, you were going to ask me, hey, which book do you recommend? I'm like, I think that one is a million times better. I have a new book coming out that is all about largely about how I did rituals to contact this ancient demon that I was referencing before that like communicated with my wife. And so this next book that I'm coming out, again, it's an entirely channeled book. And that's what's so weird about Transmissions. My first book was like kind of half channeled. It was about a bunch of weird things that happened, but there was still a lot of me writing about like things in my personal life and throwing a lot of big words in there and like kind of writing, and then Transmissions from Out of Time is primarily just a channeled book. And this book is, again, just a channeled book. And it is largely about what we didn't get into that as much, what the demonic world has shown me about what it is and how it's controlling humanity behind the scenes through things like drugs and like shitty drugs and the war machine and the coke psychology of the coke and meth psychology of Ayn Rand, except in a very literal way, and how none of this is actually nearly as horrible as that sounds. This is the fucked up thing about me. I'm like writing about this. Like I actually just had an experience recently where I was thinking about my book. And this booming voice kind of came into my head while I was thinking about it and sort of reminded me, like, this book is going to scare the shit out of people,
In like a David Ickean sort of. Well,
no, not in that way. And that it really, it does confirm, I think, some people's worst fears because there are so many. I mean, this is what like Christian theology is based on, is that there's these demons that are controlling reality, these demonic forms of intelligence.
Narcissism,
and so what I'm sort of telling them is like, well, yeah, that's accurate, but it's not a negative thing. And I think I really need to get, well, anyways, I had this experience and then I was working on some of the final edits of this book and I was like, oh yeah. I see what you're talking about. I see why some of this stuff would really scare the shit out of a lot of people. So I guess I really have to put a spin on it to continually remind them that,
when is that?
It should be out in 2019 as well. So both that out in the book should be out by 2019. So absolutely look out for it, for sure.
Awesome. And any kind of contributing writing now that this info is
for the moment, I'm pretty much going to focus on getting those projects done. But yeah, I'm going to definitely start when those are done. I'm going to definitely start pitching some more shit around. And I mean, the writing bugs it is weird that I have spent, I can kind of consider myself, I like playing music and doing visual art more than I like writing. And yet because of DISINFO and that being more popular by far than anything else that I was doing, I really have spent a lot more time, writing and going on podcasts and shit over the last, nearly 5 years of my life. So, hopefully I'll put some of that energy into doing music and getting that. But I'm sure I'll be up and writing somewhere soon. But as I just found about DISINFO about like 2 weeks ago. So the goal is actually to take a bit of time off of like really pursuing writing outside of my book at this point. So how about yourself, man? What do you got kicking the podcast up? I know you got that new Dakota Slim album out. I was checking that out actually. I really dug it.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, kind of waiting for some visual accompaniment with that record right now before I give it a big press push. But it's the fun part where I'm doing stuff to kind of help promote it in ways that I don't care about making money about, so doing fun videos or weird performances here and there. And yeah, this podcast, it keeps me humble, and it keeps me fresh with, a lot of ideas and people whose work I enjoy. I wanted to do an audiomancy kind of sub-series and dedicate a couple episodes to, say you and some other folks that really experience that.
Absolutely. It's always good to talk to somebody. Like, I always referred to it as auditory sorcery, and you were using the term audiomancy. And this other guy that I was actually talking about, who started doing like a church where he was doing psychedelic rituals, and he was calling it photomancy. So I'm glad that this is it is funny, because this was, before I guess it was about the same time I got an astral projection. But yeah, the audiomancy, the phonomancy, the auditory sorcery, as I call it, like this was my first project. Like, this is, like I said, I was that weird guy that, everybody was like, beer, girls, when they like got into college. And I'm like, I'm going to like hold in my room and like fuck with my own head with music and psychedelics.
Oh, totally. Me too.
And the tradition continues. I'm still doing it.
I can't take credit for the audiomancy. That was, I came across that from a writer named Ezra Sanzer Bell, who wrote a book of the same name. And it was really just the confluence between metaphysical ideas and musical theory. But I used to call them when I was a kid, because I used to do the same. I would make tape collages out of crazy found instrument stuff and construct these like mutant, melodies and stuff. I used to call them dims, because I found out after a while, if I anchored it with some physical action, like strumming one discordant chord or chanting, and doing that for, over a half an hour, that I would hit these trances where like this reality would dim and I could kind of see a little bit beyond, not clear, but definitely, more than just, more than just here. So tearing dimensional rifts, be it out, man. That's what it's all about. Well, I'm definitely gonna contact you once that record's finished. I want to talk about that too.
Yeah, man, it should be out soon. I will make sure that you know about it for sure. And cool. I would love to work on some audiomancy at some point. Yeah, good also, to talk to a fellow audiomancer.
Word. Well, also, why don't you send me a track that I can throw at the end of this podcast here, so people can.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Anybody that wants to check out my music right now, you can look at DMI Occult, DMIoccult.bandcamp.com. It's a lot. Actually, if you look, somebody just threw it on YouTube too, I guess. So yeah, DMIoccult.bandcamp.com, and I'll email you a link right now where you could probably just pull it up and check it out. And Black Science, that's the most popular thing that I've done. Definitely check it out, man.
Cool. Yeah, I'll tag it at the end.
Everybody that's listening, DMIoccult.bandcamp.com. If you throw Black Science and Echo Through the Eyes of Forever. Again, I talk really fast. Black Science and Echo Through the Eyes of Forever. It's on the YouTube. It's up there as well. That stuff used to be on I'm going to have to renew the Spotify shit on all that. Those albums used to be up there. I went through like a site that like charged you by the year too, and eventually the royalties ran out.
I did that. DistroKid.
What's that?
I went through DistroKid, and for this last album, I realized that there are apps where you can do it for free. And like I had been using a distribution company for years for all my old albums, and there's no need. Yeah. There's absolutely no need to pay for that.
No, there's no need. You can do it manually, but like even like CD Baby for like $30 an album, they'll just put it like on all those sites for you.
Right.
So like they're literally, and they don't charge you. But you're right. I can't remember which one I went through. It was but it was stupid. Because they basically, they charge you like a yearly fee for albums. And the funny thing, it was actually making enough to pay for it for years. And I just actually noticed like one of them, I think, is still up. And I think they just sent me like an email being like, okay, that's so it was like any royalties I was making were just going to like re-putting the thing on the site for those yearly fees. It's ridiculous. Yeah.
That's
and you're right. Now there's like tons of places that just do it like either one fee, they'll put it on all those sites for you, or you can actually just do it manually.
For this last album, I literally used a phone app, and it blasted it to, you know, Spotify, all the places, because I was just experimenting. I was like, if it doesn't work, no one cares. No one's gonna give a shit. And it did. It worked, and didn't cost me a dime. I was like, man, I'm an idiot for paying for licensing stuff. But anyways, thank you so much for taking the time. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, man. Oh, good talking to you. Yeah, I will definitely keep you updated. Like I said, I'm should be out soon, and yeah, man, good work with Dakota Swim. Yeah, like I said, I was really digging that. It was really unique. I got to listen to some more of it, definitely.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it, and let's have one on DISINFO for me tonight.
Yeah, exactly. Pour out some for your dead websites, everybody.
That's right.
And you know, the one thing I will say to close it out is, it is possible the owner's trying to sell it. It is entirely possible that somebody is going to buy it and is not entirely dead. I would say the likelihood, if somebody did do that, you would have to have some deep pockets to try and get the audience back. That's part of the reason I didn't, is because it's just like Above Top Secret lost so much of the audience. Like, I knew for a fact that if it goes dark, like, you know, hey, so I hope there is a faint possibility that somebody has enough funds and know-how to revive that site. So maybe it's not dead forever, but until then, yeah, pour one out, man.
And real quick, though, I forgot to ask, the articles that were on there for other contributors that didn't have backups or anything, is that just kind of all gone?
It is all gone. He destroyed the WordPress engine. I think it's sort of the equivalent of legally like burning your documents.
Okay.
Plus, I know for a fact that neither he or I really had know much about. Unfortunately, that site was hard coded with a lot of it wasn't an easy thing to manipulate, just like basic WordPress. It was really customized, which made it tough. Yeah.
That's why you always save a copy.
So, exactly. Somebody pointed this out to me, and I did have a couple of people freaking out. There is good news for any contributors. Yes, there's a site called webarchive.com, I believe. Just look up Web Archive. If you type in the Wayback Machine, DISINFO has been backed up there 1,000,000 times. It's a bit slow, but if you have any idea around the time that you posted your shit, you should absolutely be able to go there and find it. In fact, I went and recovered a bunch of shit that I did, because it's so weird. I actually have all the shit that I wrote, but when I was thinking about it, it was like, I probably put that into WordPress and then made a few last edits. So I actually went through, one day at work, I had some time, and I went through and grabbed all the stuff and when it aired, and it's all on Wayback Machine. And so, if you're ever looking for a vintage DISINFO fix, it's actually pretty cool, because it actually archives how the site looked back when that stuff aired. So you can actually see the changes in the site. So it's actually, I'd never heard of this website, but I'm so glad that it exists. And so, yes, you can actually find everything going back 20 years of DISINFO. I don't know how far it goes back, but yeah, it's all
that's awesome.
Webarchive.org, and it's in the Wayback Machine. Just type in disinfo.com, and you can pick tons of years and points to look at. So yeah, anybody that lost anything, you should be able to find it there for sure.
Well, there you have it, folks. Thad McKraken. Down below in the show notes, I will have links to his books, his music, his writing. I told him I'd include one of his songs, and as much as I'd love to, I'm a little worried about file size, because guess what? I don't have major hosting for the podcast. But if you want to help me get major hosting, consider being a Patreon at patreon.com/WeTheHallowed, or giving us a one-time donation. There'll be a donate button down below. The email address for PayPal is wethehallowed@gmail or sparespells@gmail.com. Anyways, I'm going to keep this short, but I do want to mention that next episode, my major milestone in that it is episode 10, will finally unearth the interview between my father and the one and only Robert Anton Wilson. And yes, you can find it with some sleuthing online, but I'll give you some insights into its history and hopefully get my dad to relish and revel in the past and discuss a little bit about his meeting with the one and only Ra. So anyways, stay tuned for that. I hope to start vlogging, getting some videos on YouTube about my personal journey and things, tactics, spells, tricks, and stuff I use to enhance the creative process and just to be a better dude. And with that, haunt on.